The wind sweeping down from the Black Hills didn't just howl, it screamed like tearing metal. But 30 feet beneath the frozen South Dakota earth, Celine Jenkins couldn't hear a thing. She sat in a velvet armchair, nursing a mug of black coffee, bathed in the soft, warm glow of amber LED strip lights. The air smelled of dried lavender and the faint, comforting metallic tang of the heated cast-iron wood stove. Her 10-year-old daughter, Chloe, was sprawled on a plush rug, coloring a picture of a dragon, blissfully unaware that the world above them was currently being buried under 34 inches of snow. Selena spent 14 months and every last dime of her savings building a secret, fully habitable bedroom inside a forgotten limestone cave on her property. Her ex-husband David Harding had spent those same 14 months trying to convince a family court judge that Celine was having a psychotic break. It turned out the only crazy thing about Celine's project was that it was the very thing that would save their lives and expose a conspiracy that no one saw coming. The story began 2 years earlier, in the bitter aftermath of a divorce that had left Celine financially drained and emotionally hollowed out. David, a senior partner at a lucrative real estate firm in Denver, was a master of psychological warfare. He didn't just want to leave Celine, he wanted to ruin her. He weaponized the legal system, filing endless motions for full custody of Chloe, claiming Celine's freelance career as an architectural draftsperson was unstable and her mental state fragile. Desperate for a sanctuary, Celine took the modest inheritance left by her late father and bought 40 acres of rugged, heavily forested land just outside of Lead, South Dakota. The property came with a dilapidated, drafty A-frame cabin built in the 1970s. David's lawyers laughed when they saw the photos. They argued it was a dangerous, unfit environment for a child, but Celine hadn't bought the land for the A-frame. During her initial survey of the property, hidden behind a dense, almost impenetrable copse of dead ponderosa pines, she had found a fissure in a limestone outcropping. Armed with a flashlight, she had squeezed through the narrow gap and discovered a cavern. It wasn't massive, but it was structurally sound, dry, and surprisingly deep, expanding into a perfectly domed chamber. For Celine, it wasn't just a cave. It was a fortress. It was a place David's money and lawyers couldn't touch. She began the construction in absolute secrecy. Under the guise of renovating the cabin, she made weekly trips to a hardware store in Spearfish. Arthur Artie Collins, the grizzled, observant owner, noted her strange purchases: heavy-duty vapor barriers, rigid foam insulation, specialized masonry anchors, and an unusual amount of quick-setting concrete. Building a bomb shelter, Mrs. Jenkins? Artie had joked once, loading a pallet of supplies into the back of her rusted Ford F-150. "Something like that, Artie," she had replied with a tight smile. The logistics were a nightmare. Celine did all the labor herself, mostly at night. She hauled materials via a modified wheelbarrow down a disguised trail. She sealed the cave's porous walls with hydraulic cement to prevent moisture, then built a room within the room. She framed it with treated lumber, packed the gaps with R30 insulation, and ran heavy gauge wiring to a bank of deep-cycle solar batteries hidden in a disguised shed near the main cabin. The masterpiece was the entrance. She salvaged a steel vault door from a demolished bank in Sturgis, paying a local mechanic in cash to cut it down. She mounted it directly into the limestone, then painstakingly covered the exterior with fiberglass and rock dust so that, when closed, it was entirely indistinguishable from the surrounding cave wall. Inside, the room was a marvel of compact design. It had a composting toilet, a small kitchenette, a queen-size bed, and a ventilation system that pulled fresh air through a concealed PVC pipe while venting the wood stove smoke through a natural, winding chimney in the rocks, dispersing it so it was invisible from the ground. It was her secret womb in the earth, and she hadn't planned on telling anyone about it. The catalyst came the week of Thanksgiving. The custody battle had reached a boiling point. David had filed an emergency injunction, claiming he had new evidence that Celine's living conditions were putting Chloe in imminent danger. The judge granted Celine one last holiday weekend with her daughter before a mandatory home inspection by court-appointed officials. Celine picked Chloe up in Denver and drove the 7 hours north to the South Dakota property. The mood in the car was heavy. Chloe, though young, felt the tension. "Is Dad really going to make me stay with him forever?" Chloe had asked softly, staring out the window at the graying sky. "No, sweetie, I promise," Celine had said, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. They arrived at the A-frame on a Wednesday. By Thursday morning, the National Weather Service issued a rare catastrophic warning. A bomb cyclone was forming over the plains. It was expected to bring hurricane-force winds and up to 4 feet of snow, burying the Black Hills. Celine watched the barometric pressure plummet on her phone. She looked at the A-frame's sagging roof, groaning under the wind that was already picking up. She knew the old cabin wouldn't hold. "Grab your backpack, Chloe," Celine said, her voice steady but urgent. "We're going to the secret room." Chloe's eyes lit up. Celine had told her about the room as if it were a fairy tale, a magical forge she was building just for the two of them. Carrying supplies, they trekked the 200 yards through the biting cold to the pine copse. The wind was already vicious, throwing ice crystals that stung their faces like glass. Celine pulled back the camouflage netting, unlocked the heavy steel door, and ushered her daughter inside. When the door slammed shut and the heavy iron deadbolts slid into place, the roar of the storm was instantly severed. It was replaced by profound, unshakable silence. Celine lit the stove, turned on the warm lights, and for the first time in 2 years, felt completely safe. The blizzard hit with apocalyptic fury. For 24 hours, the storm battered the state. Power lines snapped, roads were obliterated, and emergency services were paralyzed. Down in the bunker, time lost its meaning. Celine and Chloe played board games, ate hot soup heated on the stove, and read books. It was idyllic, but at 2 a.m. on the second night, something impossible happened. Celine was jolted awake. Chloe was fast asleep, but Celine's heart was hammering against her ribs. Thump, 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 thump. It was muffled, distorted by the limestone in the steel door, but it was unmistakable. Someone was banging on the exterior of the vault door. Celine froze. It couldn't be a neighbor. The nearest house was 3 miles away. It couldn't be a rescue team. They wouldn't know the door was there. Her mind raced to David. Had he come for Chloe? Had he tracked them? She slipped out of bed, grabbed the heavy iron fire poker, and crept to the door. She pressed her ear against the freezing metal. Between the howling gusts of wind filtering down the entrance tunnel, she heard a voice. Weak, ragged, and desperate. "Help! Please, God, help!" Bull. Celine hesitated. Opening the door meant exposing her secret. It meant risking Chloe's safety. But leaving a human being out in a -20-degree whiteout was a death sentence. She threw the deadbolts and hauled the heavy door open just a few inches. A massive drift of snow tumbled in, followed by a man. He collapsed onto the floor of the secret room, groaning. He was in his late 40s, wearing a thin, inadequate parka encrusted with ice. His lips were blue, his skin pale as wax. He wasn't David. Celine quickly dragged him entirely inside and pushed the heavy door shut, sealing out the lethal cold. She grabbed blankets, stripped off his soaked, frozen jacket, and dragged him closer to the stove. It took nearly an hour for the man to stop violently shivering and open his eyes. He blinked at the amber lights, the plush rug, the sturdy walls, and finally at Celine, who was sitting across from him, the fire poker resting casually but intentionally across her lap. "Who are you?" Celine demanded quietly, not wanting to wake Chloe. "And how did you find this door?" The man swallowed hard, eyeing the fire poker. My name is Leon Hobbs," he rasped. I followed the GPS tracker." "What GPS tracker?" Leon looked down in shame. "The one I put on the undercarriage of your truck in Denver?" Celine felt the blood drain from her face. You're a private investigator. David hired you. Leon nodded weakly. He paid me a premium, told me you were living in a squalid shack, told me to follow you up here, get photos of the dangerous conditions during the storm, and prove you were unfit. He said it would be an easy job, so you stalked me into a bomb cyclone. I was parked a mile down the road, Leon explained, his voice trembling. When the storm hit, my car's engine died. The heater failed. I realized I was going to freeze to death. I tried to walk to your cabin. He paused, looking at Celine with wide, terrified eyes. Mrs. Jenkins, your cabin's gone. Celine stared at him. What do you mean, gone? A massive ponderosa pine snapped in the wind. It crushed the roof. The whole structure pancaked. I thought you and your daughter were dead inside. Leon coughed, rubbing his hands together. I tried to dig through the rubble, but the wind was too strong. Then I saw a trail in the snow leading to the rocks. I followed it, hoping to find an outbuilding. I fell against the rock wall, and it sounded hollow. Leon looked around the pristine, warm, incredibly secure underground room. He saw the sleeping 10-year-old tucked safely into a warm bed. He saw the structural integrity, the ventilation, the emergency food rations. He told me you were crazy, Leon whispered. He told me you were endangering her. Does it look like she's in danger, Mr. Hobbs? Celine asked coldly. Leon slowly shook his head. No, ma'am. It looks like you're the only sane person in this whole mess. The storm raged for another day before finally breaking. By Sunday morning, the skies over South Dakota were a brilliant, blinding blue. Celine, Chloe, and Leon dug their way out of the snowdrift blocking the entrance. When they emerged, the devastation was staggering. The forest was stripped, and the A-frame cabin was utterly destroyed, splintered under the weight of a massive tree and 3 feet of snow. If Celine hadn't built the cave room, she and Chloe would have been killed instantly. It took local authorities led by Deputy Sheriff Thomas Riker another 12 hours to clear the road with a snowplow. When Riker's cruiser pulled up to the wreckage of the cabin, he jumped out, expecting to find bodies. Instead, he found Celine, Chloe, and a very sheepish private investigator sitting on a cleared rock, drinking hot cocoa from a thermos. Celine? Thank God, Deputy Riker yelled, trudging through the snow. We got a call from your ex-husband in Denver. He was screaming that you kidnapped his daughter into a blizzard. He sent a welfare check. Celine locked eyes with Leon. The private investigator stood up, dusting snow off his jeans. Deputy, Leon said, pulling out his PI badge. My name is Leon Hobbs. I can testify that David Harding placed a tracking device on Mrs. Jenkins' vehicle across state lines, which is a federal offense. Furthermore, I can testify that Mrs. Jenkins provided state-of-the-art, secure shelter for her daughter during a catastrophic weather event, whereas Mr. Harding's actions actively placed all of us in danger. Deputy Riker blinked, looking from the ruined cabin to the pristine, calm faces of Celine and Chloe. Where exactly did you shelter? Celine smiled a genuine, weightless smile. We made a little fort in the woods, Thomas. I'll show you. 3 weeks later, they were back in family court in Denver. David Harding looked smug, confident that the destruction of the cabin would be the final nail in Celine's coffin. His lawyer presented photos of the smashed A-frame, arguing that Celine had recklessly driven their daughter into a death trap. Then, Celine's lawyer called Leon Hobbs to the stand. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as the private investigator David had hired laid out the entire story. He submitted his own photos, not of a squalid shack, but of a brilliant, structurally magnificent underground sanctuary. He provided the invoice for the GPS tracker David had ordered him to plant. He described how the mother David called unstable had single-handedly engineered a bunker that saved 3 lives. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for manipulation, turned her gaze on David. It was the look of a predator zeroing in on prey. Mr. Harding, the judge said, her voice dripping with ice, you hired a man to stalk your ex-wife into a deadly storm, hoping to catch her failing. Instead, you caught her succeeding in ways you couldn't comprehend. I am granting full legal and physical custody to Mrs. Jenkins, and I am referring this GPS tracking issued to the district attorney's office." David sat frozen, his pristine reputation and controlling grip shattered in an instant. Later that evening, back in the Black Hills, Celine and Chloe sat in their underground room. The vault door was locked, the fire was crackling. The world outside was cold, harsh, and unpredictable. But inside the earth, it was perfectly warm. "Mom?" Chloe asked, looking up from her book. "Are we going to build a new house on top of the cave now?" Celine took a sip of her coffee, looking at the reinforced limestone walls that had held the weight of a storm and the weight of her past. "Maybe eventually, sweetie," Celine smiled. "But I think we'll stay down here just a little while longer.